So last week I did a video titled 5 Things I'm Worried About with Kevin Stefanski. And it's not because I am extremely pessimistic about the future that Kevin Stefanski could potentially bring. That's not the case at all. I just simply believe that when looking at the future, you have to look at the good possibilities, and you definitely it's more important to me to look at the bad and the negative outcomes than it is to look at the good, because you can look at the good all you want. If things turn out good, things are going to be good. But if you don't prepare for the bad, then it's going to be even worse than bad. It's just my own personal philosophy. So that's why I did 5 reasons to be worried about Kevin Stefanski last week. But this week, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to talk about the reasons I am actually excited for Kevin Stefanski. And the first reason I'm excited about Kevin Stefanski is the offensive philosophy change. Now, Kevin Stefanski, or at least his presence, because I don't know if he's calling plays, but I'm pretty sure he's going to have a large impact on what the offensive philosophy is going to be. And if that is the case, which it should be, I think there is going to be an even greater emphasis on running the ball. And if you compare what the 2019 Vikings did, which Kevin Stefanski was the offensive coordinator of, versus what the Browns did last year, you'll see where that difference in offensive philosophy will be. The Vikings last year were number 6 in yards per game, rushing yards per game. The Browns were number 12. And then the stark difference comes here in rushing attempts, where the Vikings were number 4 in the NFL with 476 rushing attempts, where the Browns were 22nd in the NFL with just 393. And then if you look at passing attempts, the Vikings were 30th in the NFL, while the Browns were 19th. And if you look at completion percentage, while the Vikings threw the ball less, they completed it at a more efficient pace, so 68.5%, and the Browns threw the ball more and weren't as accurate, and that's just going to go with also throwing the ball more. You're going to have a lower completion percentage. Then if you look at interceptions, the Vikings, of course, threw the ball less opportunities to throw interceptions, but also threw drastically less interceptions than the Cleveland Browns did last year. As a team, they threw 8, and the Browns threw 21. I believe all of those interceptions belonging to Baker Mayfield. So if you look at that, what that tells you is that the Browns are going to have a less balanced offense, and it's going to lean more on the run game. And with Kareem Hunt being retained, Nick Chubb being on the roster, and the additions of Austin Hooper and Jack Conklin, it seems very obvious that this team's going to run the ball a ton. And this isn't like other organizations or other teams that have played lip service to the idea of running the ball, because, as Browns fans, I think we've heard coaches come in and say, we're going to run the ball. We're going to play that hard blue collar style Browns football. Like, how many coaches? Hugh Jackson said it. Freddie Kitchens said it. Every coach that's come in here and ran the ball like 10 times a game has said that they're going to get down to the basics and run the ball and do it for the dog pound. Like, every coach has come in and paid us that lip service. The reason I'm actually buying into this actually happening is because when Kevin Stefanski had a say over his offense last year in Minnesota, that's obviously what they did. And it looks like the acquisitions made by the front office and Andrew Berry are pointing towards an offense moving in that exact direction. So those two actions make me actually believe that they're going to run the ball more, which, when you're going to have a backfield that has Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, I'm in favor of that. That is a good decision. Also, if you just in the scope of Kevin Stefanski, what he did in 2019 with the Vikings, Kirk Cousins was a lot more efficient than he was in Washington. Well, not a lot more, but more efficient. And now I'm going to say this because, one, I think people, when they talk about Kirk Cousins, they have this like warped perception of Kirk Cousins, as if Kirk Cousins is just like a bottom of the barrel quarterback. He is clearly a very good, like, Pro Bowl borderline, but just below, kind of in that area. He's not an elite quarterback, but he's definitely one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and he's been so for a while. I believe every game that he started, 16 games, he's thrown over 4,000 yards. And then last year, his most successful season, so I'm saying his most efficient season, he didn't throw for over 4,000 yards. He played in 15 games. But he had much better efficient numbers and the team won more. The Kirk Cousins has never been a bad quarterback, so I don't buy the argument that like Kevin Stefanski made Kirk Cousins good. No, Sean McVay and Jay Gruden had him playing at good levels before him. But where I will give some credence to the argument about Kevin Stefanski and Kirk Cousins is that Kevin Stefanski called an offense that allowed Kirk Cousins to be more efficient. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's just compare Kirk Cousins last year in Washington to his second year, his only full year with Kevin Stefanski as the offensive coordinator, and you'll see the difference. In attempts, in Washington, 540 passing attempts. In Minnesota, 444. So he threw the ball less, threw for less yards, 4,093 yards in Washington on 64% completion. But in Minnesota, 3,603 yards on 69% completion, threw less touchdowns, 30 in Washington, 26 in Minnesota, but threw way less interceptions, 10 in Washington, 6 in Minnesota. So Kirk Cousins under Kevin Stefanski wasn't, I don't think, a better quarterback or a drastically different quarterback, but he was a more efficient, less turnover-prone quarterback, which is very important because when you look at one of the main jobs Kevin Stefanski is going to have to do when it comes to Baker Mayfield and improving him is he's going to have to make Baker Mayfield or create an offense that encourages Baker Mayfield to tone down the interceptions and turnovers, because if you're going to be a run-heavy offense, you can't have a ton of turnovers. Turnovers are the death knell in a run-heavy offense. So Baker has to turn down the turnovers, and he has to be more efficient. He has to get more out of less with his wide receivers and, with his receiving tight ends. So if you look at that and what he was able to improve with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota versus what he's going to have to improve with Baker Mayfield, those two things line up because Baker does need to get more efficient. He does need to turn the ball over less. He does need to learn how to do less. Will do more with less, because sometimes Baker Mayfield has a tendency to try to do way too much than he needs to do, and that's normally where those interceptions come from, in moments where Baker Mayfield's trying to get way too much accomplished than he needs to. The second thing I'm very encouraged about Kevin Stefanski is Joe Woods, his defensive coordinator. Now, I know I listed his coordinators for their lack of head coaching experience as kind of a negative in the last video, and I still stand by that. But if you look at Joe Woods as a defensive coordinator and his resume as just a defensive coordinator, not somebody you're leaning on for kind of administrative help, he's very good. He has a great reputation. Everybody who's ever worked under him or worked with him says great things about him. And then you could see where his philosophy is if you look at one of their key players when he was in Denver and what they did when he was there and when he wasn't. It's Von Miller. Von Miller with Joe Woods had 14.5 sacks versus the 8 he had this year. He had 14 tackles for loss versus the 10 he had this year, 26 QB hits versus the 20 that he had without Joe Woods. And this is the most important part. He was sent on blitzes, design blitzes, a determined 88 times versus 52. So to me, that says that, Joe Woods is going to bring a very aggressive, more blitz-heavy defense, which we've seen that with Greg Williams, but this is obviously a very different version of that. And it'd be nice to see Myles Garrett and, hopefully some other pieces, maybe acquired in draft or what's left of free agency, be added to that if that's going to be the Browns' philosophy, because I don't think right now they can blitz a lot and be successful with the personnel they have, because we've seen how just weak that defensive line is, minus Myles Garrett. So I think they need to add a couple pieces if that's the case. But it seems like they're interested in trying to add a couple extra pieces. And also, if you look at their DVOA rankings against the pass, they were actually number 4 that year. They had Joe Woods and they were 16th in run defense. Not a great number, but the Browns would take it as a team that ranked in the bottom of the league in run defense last year per DVOA. So Joe Woods, I think, is a positive, and I do think he's an upgrade over Steve Wilks, who I think he was a little bit too vanilla for his own good, and he stuck to the 4-2-5 way too much in situations that just didn't warrant having that many defensive backs on the field, which in turn hurt the run-stopping ability of this defense. Also, doing things like sticking with the lighter guys inside, like a Larry Ogunjobi. These are things that just plagued the defense as the season went on. And I think Joe Woods is going to be a upgrade over him for those reasons. Now, the next thing I'm excited about with the Browns under Kevin Stefanski, and I kind of touched on this before, but Nick Chubb with Jack Conklin. And that is such an important pairing because Jack Conklin's a tackle. Whether he plays right or left tackle, he's probably going to play right if the Browns can get who they want at left tackle. But if they don't, they can switch him to left tackle and just have Chris Hubbard replay right tackle. They have options there. But with Jack Conklin and Nick Chubb, that combination, that's so very important because, well, Jack Conklin is a very strong run blocker, especially and specifically on the edge. Nick Chubb is the best downhill edge running back in the NFL. So those two being able to have each other in the spots they need them the most is going to be tremendous. You pack that on top of Kevin Stefanski's offensive philosophy, which is going to be a more run-heavy style. You got Kareem Hunt to take some of the blows for the whole season because it doesn't look like he's going to face a suspension for the marijuana violation. And you start to see where this offense can have a very good amount of success. If you have that dangerous rushing attack, and then you add on Baker Mayfield with play action, throwing to Odell, throwing to Jarvis, throwing to Austin Hooper, you start to see how dangerous this offense can be. And more importantly, how simple that danger is. It isn't like last year where they were trying to do like 14 different concepts to try to merge them together to create the danger. It's very simple. It's very straightforward, and it's very easy to comprehend how they are going to be very successful with this philosophy. And I think that helps it because we know with everything going on that we're probably going to have a shortened off season, that we're not going to have a lot of time. So the simpler the philosophy and the solution to the problems that the Browns had last year are, the easier they are to pick up during the season, the less complicated that process has to be, and the more likely it is that the Browns are able to overcome the fact that they're going to have a shortened offseason. And the last thing that I am encouraged about with Kevin Stefanski and everything that's kind of surrounded him since he's gotten hired is the uniform philosophy. The front office is making decisions that don't make me scratch my head about if the coaches want them. And that might sound really simple and really basic if you're not a Browns fan or if you're just kind of like peeking in from a team with a regular organization, but that's something that doesn't happen every year. Every year there's a signing that's like, who wanted this to happen, right? It was with Hugh Jackson and RG3. We're like, who wanted that to happen? Was that a Hugh Jackson thing? Was that Sachi Brown thing? Who wanted to bring that in? I don't understand that move. Every year there is a move like that. Olivier Vernon trade for Kevin Zeitler, hiring Freddie Kitchens. There's always a question of like who in the building wanted that to happen versus who in the building didn't want that. There's always that internal kind of tug of rope game happening within the organization. This offseason, it's been free of that. Every decision that's been made, they're like, that makes sense. Jack Conklin makes a ton of sense. They're going to run the ball a lot. They're probably going to run the ball on the edge a lot. Jack Conklin, very good edge run blocker with Nick Chubb. That makes a ton of sense. Austin Hooper needed another tight end, one that can block and also receive. Very good at getting the seams, very smart, high football IQ that'll help be a blanket for Baker Mayfield. Makes a ton of sense. You don't have to ask who in the building wanted that to happen, right? Case Keenum makes a ton of sense. GM and head coach didn't draft Baker Mayfield, but inherited him. Need a backup plan because they understand the seriousness of this season. It's not a question of who wanted that to happen versus who didn't want it to happen. None of the signings are that way, and it's not like we can say that every offseason. It finally feels like, the Browns have committed to a uniform philosophy. And we can have our arguments about whether you think that philosophy is the right way or the wrong way, but one thing we can all agree on is that there's not one way to do things. And as long as everybody is in the building is in agreement on how they're going to do things and how they as an organization are going to do things and are uniform in that way, then it matters less on what method they choose, whether it's a method you would choose or not. Again, I wouldn't have gone this route, but I'm happy they're uniformed in this route because they've tried to merge football, classical football guy ideologies with completely new school, outsider techniques, and it hasn't worked out. They have not committed to a single philosophy in this building since Bill Belichick was hired in the 90s, and still there was struggle inside the building when they did that. This is the first time in a long time that the Browns have just committed to a philosophy and decided that's what they're going to go with. And I think that is going to bode very strong results because if you look at what they're getting and you look what their coach is going to do on the field, these are all things that look like they help each other. And I know it sounds like a crazy idea, right? Making decisions is going to help your head coach become a successful head coach, but that's not necessarily that can sometimes be a foreign concept in Berea. So, that is so huge to me. That's one of the things that's made me okay with the Kevin Stefanski signing as a fan that was not for it. It's one of the things that made me okay with the Andrew Berry signing as somebody who really wanted John Dorsey to stay. The uniform philosophy that they have committed to from the top on down is something that does encourage me because I just want this team to go in the same direction. I don't necessarily care which direction that is, but just go in the same direction. As long as it's a variation on the going up, it doesn't matter. And it seems like they're making decisions that are going to improve this team, and I'm all for that. So that is the most important thing and why I'm excited about Kevin Stefanski and this new era upon new eras that we're going into. But let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on why you are excited or not excited. I know a lot of people were excited in the last video down below, but give me a deeper explanation. What specifically makes you excited for this team's upcoming season? Let me know in the comment section down below. But thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ding the notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. But again, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.